Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Okay, Jody Lynn.
Yes.
The word for today is convergence.
Yeah.
And it's going to come out in a number of different ways with our guests, but I also wanted to let you know I've got a little convergence of my own going on.
Ooh.
I've told you about this privately. I don't think I've brought it up on the show, but I've been dealing with an issue. Obviously I have the gardening service, and I have this other housekeeping service that I'm starting up and so forth, and trying to take care of all the employees and all that. And I've been dealing with an issue at QuickBooks for quite some time, because this was the gardening business I bought for my ex-wife after we broke up. And one of the things we thought we had transferred everything over. We had done everything we knew to do. But one of the things that didn't happen was the merchant account was still in her name, which was really odd. We couldn't quite understand why that was. So we ended up talking to QuickBooks, and in belying their name, they've taken months to try to resolve this thing, giving me very bad advice every step along the way, so that everything they told me was completely wrong. And today, I had a number of things going on that, we're in the middle of starting up the gardening season. It's perfect time of year for doing that. And I'm getting all the crew up and running and getting the estimators out there and all that kind of stuff. And everything was kind of coming together really nicely. And in the midst of all that, I'm still trying to iron out this issue with a merchant account. And I've been going through hell, really. I've been going through a really tough time to make that happen. All of a sudden, a thought came to me. I said, they kept telling me that you can't transfer the merchant account. I wonder if you can just cancel the merchant account and start a new one. Is it possible that they just never thought to tell me that? And so I called them up. They said, well, yeah, sure, that's the right way to do it. I said, well, I've been dealing with you for 7 months on this thing. This is the first time you guys figured that out. So in a matter of 30 minutes, a problem that had been taking 7 months just got cleared, just like that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm willing to bet you any amount of beans you want that that's exactly the kind of thing our guest is going to talk about today.
Yeah. I'm excited.
So let's bring him on. So we have David Allen Brown joining us today, who is an expert on conversions. David, how did I do?
That's exactly the way it seems to happen. I have a very similar story from just this past weekend.
Okay.
4 days of running around in circles looking for an apartment. When the answer came, it was super easy and no problem. And it's like, well, why didn't I start here?
What happened? Yeah.
And sometimes we have to pull ourselves into that place where everything's working the right way and it's all converging, as you say.
It really does converge. Yeah. And when it does, that's the thing that's so annoying about it. You go through all this stuff, and then when it converges, it's so freaking easy.
Yeah.
We humans make things really complicated, don't
We're
we?
good
And
at
then
that.
we always end up at that place. It's like, that's our goal, is just try to start there.
I always say it's good to have a skill. Maybe not that one.
Yeah.
So give us your background, David. Tell us how you got into this whole convergence thing in the first place.
Well, yeah, I've been in personal development kind of my whole life. And when I was younger, I like to tell people I was a leadership geek. Other kids went to soccer camp or went to gymnastics, and I actually went to leadership camp. So before my senior year in high school, I went to 3 one summer, and I was the leadership guy. And I was part of, and then continued doing that in staffing as a young adult. I went off to New York City for college to be rich and famous. And then I came back to my heart calling, which was just connecting with people, helping them find their inner awesomeness, which is always there, doing leadership development for young people. I traveled and spoke. I wrote a couple books. And then I sort of took a big break as a stay-at-home dad for 18 years, which is its own kind of empowerment role. And through a conflagration of things, sort of lost my power to some degree, sort of lost myself, lost my voice. There was just a lot of cogs in the wheel of being a grown-up and being an adult and being in different relationships and feeling a little stuck and a little run down and I'm making it a little more lighthearted than it was, because after 20 some odd years of that, it really sunk me into a.
Yeah, we call those crash and burn moments, but
yeah, right. Mine was a slow crash and burn, about 25 years of descent before I realized that I was really struggling, that I was really, some pretty serious depression, and then some ideation that finally sort of snapped me out of, hey, I got to figure out what's going on. And in that process, finally finding good support and being really honest in that process, then I started to remember, hey, there used to be this thing I did that helped me feel confident about what I was doing. I guess I'm a very verbal person, and it really involved sort of voices in my head. And I used to talk to myself all the time as a kid, and sort of succumb to the only crazy people talk to themselves and this and that. And then I started studying and realized, well, wait, Freud had 3 aspects of the personality. There are trios of personality all over our universe, and the places. I studied physics, where famous astrophysicist talks about matter, meaning, and energy as the fundamental parts of these. So all of this trilogy sort of. And then I took a deep breath. I had some rather amazing experiences in my life, some real truths brought to me, some great sort of growths. And out began to emerge not just that there was a voice, but what are the different aspects of my human and spiritual experience? What have I learned over all of these years, and how do they appear? And as so much of my writing and teaching has been, I found I was inspired with a capital I, and loved playing around with the words. And now I have a full course and a full idea of how these voices can be recognized and regulated and make for awesome living.
Jody Lynn, this sounds very much to me like what you call a download.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Straight from source.
Straight from source.
The wisdom of the universe.
Yeah, I love that phrase, the download, right?
Yeah. That's
Jody Lynn's a channeler, so she's an expert at downloads. She takes them all the time. It's really remarkable, the stuff that comes out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you follow your intuition. That's cool.
Right, which I had learned to do when I was younger, and then forgot to do during that descent that I was talking about,
we do that.
And then got back, and now now life is pretty crazy, freaking amazing these days, even when it's overwhelming and and difficult and anxious and all the rest. It's all the things. But the difference is that as few as a handful of years ago, I was really feeling nothing. And so now even the tough feelings I welcome, because that's living. And before I wasn't.
Jody Lynn, this sound familiar?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so funny how there's so many synchronicities in our lives. And I was legitimately like 2 hours ago talking to my dad about the voice in my head. I was in a car accident last year. Oh, okay. And all of a sudden I got subpoenaed to be a witness. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I've started to experience panic attacks and like day terrors, I will call them. But it's not debilitating to the point where I can't do anything. It's just a lot harder for me to get back to that regular state, that homeostasis, if you will, like hard to catch my breath in those moments. And so we were talking, and he was actually saying you should give a voice to that little voice in your head that's, carrying you away. He's like, I feel like that's helped me with, my PTSD. So I'm excited to hear about all the voices inside of your head and how they relate to the voices inside mine.
Yeah.
It must be good to know you're not in a place where you're thought of as crazy.
Yeah. No, I think it's beautiful that you talk to yourself, David. I also went through the same things. I started looking at it more from the perspective of becoming my own best friend, because I'm not just the side that the world sees, and I'm not just the side that, I am alone by myself. I'm a bunch of different things. So to figure myself out, I started to have more conversations like, hey, how are you thinking about this? Like I was 2 or 3 different people so that I could take the judgment out of the conversation, because I'm better with my friends than I am with myself. I'm more conscious and patient.
Well, we all are.
Great. Exactly. I have more grace.
Yeah.
So I figured if I just started treating those other pieces of me like a best friend, then I could get somewhere with the information, or I could get some information so that I could start, having some conscious, maybe convergence is the right word here.
Well, and that's actually one of the places that we start in the program, which is I draw the parallel between the phrase holding space and holding space for others, and all of the ways we do that with compassion and active listening and non-judgment and all of those things. And I really do invite everyone to say, are you treating yourself that way? And maybe why not? Or how can you begin to practice those things? And that's one of the things that I'm really pleased to share kind of came through, was not just me talking for, 27 different lessons, but lots and lots of lessons and journals and ways for people to apply things. But yeah, that same type of approach, which was when I first, kind of rediscovered or allowed my voices to kind of kick in again, they were a little salty. they were a little frustrated. They're a little like, you've been absent.
Well, it took you so long. I mean, come on.
We got some healing to do here. And so if you think that just finding the voices is, so great, yay, you finally done. It's like, no. Sometimes finding the voices is finding where the work really needs to be done.
It's so true. And the fact is, we often talk about this too, how we are so tough on ourselves to the point where if we treated our friends the way we treat ourselves, we wouldn't have any.
Yeah. Right.
So trying to retrain ourselves to be kind to ourselves in this kind of a friendship situation, friendship with your own internal voices, that can be a little intimidating.
Without a doubt, yeah. And recognizing that in the times when those less kind things come out, being able to have the emotional intelligence to step back and say, wait, where'd that come from? Or, how true is that? Just simple mantras that help us not react even to ourselves, putting it in the terminology that you are. If a friend came at us in that way, we'd have to use all of our power to sort of be like, wait, what does that mean? And what does this relationship mean? And how do I approach that? And how am I going to process that? And part of the early process of recognizing our inner dialogue is the understanding that, there may be times when it's going to surprise you. And so you got to develop.
In fact, one of the things we have to ask ourselves is do I trust that? Do I trust that side of me? That for me is one of my biggest issues, and still is to a certain extent. Can I really trust that internal voice?
Yeah. And how did you find that you found that trust?
A lot of stumbling.
I'm kidding.
A lot of stumbling, a lot of missteps. But you do it often enough, and you at least give yourself a chance to kind of look at it often enough, and you begin to realize over time that it really doesn't steer you wrong.
Sure.
And that's what helps, but it takes a while.
Well, right. But the circular part of the conversation is how often do we allow other people to fail and other people to grow and other people to learn through their mistakes? And so, yes, of course, we have to start with allowing ourselves to do that too. So it's a wonderful answer. It's a perfect answer.
It's the hardest part as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But once you've established that, what's the second part? I mean, you said that's the first part. What comes next?
Well, right. And actually, I will say that that's actually the second part, because the first part is an understanding that we go through a process of allowing whomever wants to learn my point of view to define and establish their own relationship with higher power. And this is not an agnostics course. There needs to be a connection to an understanding of something greater than ourselves in order for it to work, because one of the voices is that of the greater, of the divine, of Holy Spirit, of God. And the exercise is to allow people to define that for themselves. I'm not starting a church, and I'm not I bring a point of view, and you hear it throughout the course. And I have an expansive view of the energy that is God and the power that is unconditional love. And folks who have gone through this course who have differing spiritual foundations have found that it works for them. So one of the things that we do first is make certain that that's in place, because you can't dive in without it. And if you get to that point, which is step one, without it, and it's not for you, then we need to know right away.
And I appreciate that you're not trying to start a church. I mean, literally, I do appreciate that, because
Absolutely.
that kind of opens things up. Now you don't have to have a particular faith in order to do this.
Precisely.
That's really
and that's
important.
really important. And I will say that probably the hard stop is, do you recognize that you can be in relationship with your higher power? So some faith traditions really are that God is external and we're just constantly affected by whatever that great wisdom decides, and that's all there is to it. And I will say that you do need to be able to transcend into an understanding that you can be in relationship with that higher power through prayer, through interaction, through recognizing the way that divine grace is coming around you, the doors that are opening, however you would say, but that you recognize that power operates in your life and that you can interact with it. That would be my baseline as far as where on the spiritual scale you would need to be.
I think for Jody Lynn and I, and for most of the people involved here on the show, all of it is internal. I mean, the idea of it being external just doesn't even work for us. So we're right in alignment.
We're in the right place then. You bet. So yeah, we start with that. Then we go into the recognizing the voices and the kindness and the nurturing of them from there. And then it starts to be, okay, so what are these voices and kind of what do they need and how do they support each other?
That's always a good question. Jody Lynn told us a lot about how I mean, you have a council. She has an entire committee who serves her. It's really something. How many people are involved in this? I don't even know, Jody Lynn. I mean,
there's 6 guides. Yeah, there's 6 guides that I talked to over there. But I feel like there's more iterations of self within also. They're like one stream of consciousness, and then there's like, I can clearly hear God, source, whatever you want to call it, hear that, and then I also feel like I as a person have like little Jody. I have the picture in my mind. I've actually said this in the course that I teach. She's like very irrational. Think of like a cartoon, little tiny girl, big head though, big hair, and just like hair on fire running. That is one of those internal voices. She just gets scared and she runs. Like that's all she does, screams and runs, and she doesn't want to talk about anything. Let's go.
Well, it's nice to know what your job is. If you're one of those voices, you got to know what the job is.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Yeah, to pin her down and have conversation at the beginning was very, very, very difficult. Like she was just running. That was it. Yeah, that one was an interesting one to deal with. But she comes up every once in a while, like I think she's there with this panic attack stuff that we were talking about. She's a part of that. Let's go. Let's run. We're scared.
Like she's the cheerleader of it, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. She's got a whole band behind her now. Like, holy man.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And that's such a great visual. First of all, I love that there's sort of that, and that movie Inside Out, the Pixar movies, kind of given us visuals of some of the voices. And I'll tell you, I mean, I'm down to I'm really focusing in on 3, and I think that within that there are iterations. But what I wanted to say about what you were just saying, Jody Lynn, was how human that is. And you even use that word, I think, or something very similar, like, there's just that very sort of base self within me that is responding to what's going on around and has feelings that pop up sometimes out of the blue. And one of the things I talk about often is how I fell into the traps of believing that any one of these parts of our lives, any one of these 3, was the way to do it, including the spiritual, being stuck in, I'll just stay up here. There's a term for it called spiritual shortcutting, which is, I'll just trust in everything that's bigger than me. And I'll just sit here and wait for the universe to come to me, and I'll know I'll be provided for, and whatever happens, happens. And it's this sort of releasing of any sort of responsibility. And I got very caught in that for a while. And then it became very destructive because I used to say things to myself like, if I was more holy, then I wouldn't be depressed. Or if I was closer to God, then I wouldn't be afraid of what was happening around me. Or if I had more trust and faith, then I wouldn't have anxiety. Well, you can already hear the trap that I'm falling into.
You're using it to whack yourself.
Right. And because I'm human,
Yeah.
you know, and so there's this human thing happening around me, and being stuck in any one place I found was a dangerous part. And we talk about that in the course, is that, you know, because if one of them is emotion, you know, certainly we can be very caught up in that, and that can feel like anxiety. And I do address that you know, there's professional call to that. Sometimes we have to find help and support across the board of what we're experiencing. And then the other one for me is what I call the actualized voice, which is the doing voice. And sometimes I'm very, very caught up in just the everyday life, and this just got to be this, and I'm just focused on getting stuff done. And for a long time, I thought that was the intellectual voice. Like, if I just figure everything out, then I'll be okay. And right. That's a little bit of it, but I got over that. So these three areas converge, and when they're in agreement and supporting each other, that's when really awesome stuff happens.
So in the context of what we're talking about here, but also in the context of what you do in the course, let's define convergence. What do you mean by convergence?
Okay. So I call it convergent energy, and it's essentially when, let's say there's a decision to be made, for example, or an anxiety that's come up. Here's a simple example that happened to me recently, or all the time. You know, I worry about money.
Really all the time. I mean,
really all the time.
Yeah. Now, so you know.
So I worry about money, and you know, I think about it in a general sense of prosperity, but sometimes it's just money. I mean, the world goes round, and I have to and so I'll look at my bank account or look at what's coming up on my ledger as a self-employed person, and I'll get that sort of acid dump in my stomach. Right. So that's my instinctual side saying, okay, we have some fear here.
Just a bit.
And what came in the other day was that the spiritual voice, the higher power voice, said with great authority, I will take care of the money.
Ooh,
I know. And it wasn't enough. I was going out and running errands, and I was still very anxious, and I was gazing at every price tag, and I was sitting and saying, well, what's going to happen? And I realized that as powerful and amazing as that voice is, convergence comes when the emotional side is recognized and integrated and responded to. What exactly is your fear? What exactly is it that you're experiencing right now? What is true around you? Let the higher power soothe you that all will be well. Let us return to a faith and have that conversation and sorting. That started to ease my anxiety.
That's a lot better than the alternative, because the alternative, as I see it, is that other voice saying he's not listening this time, is he? He's still not listening.
Right, precisely. Yeah. And the actualized side says, the doing side, the human being, verb, the human being, says, what can I do to assure you that we're taking steps, we're making motion, that there's activity happening? And so all of a sudden there's a couple of phone calls I need to make. There's a follow-up I need to do. There's a podcast I need to book. There's all right, great, then let's do that. And then together, those three things operating together, now I'm moving forward. I'm answering the call in faith. I'm aware of what's happening around me. I'm looking for the signs that help me recognize that everything is truly okay in the moment. And I'm taking steps towards things that will be okay in the future. And I'm doing all of that initially just in faith to soothe the immediate anxiety, but then eventually in convergent energy going into manifestation, which is then using the resources of the universe to say, oh, and here it all is, by the way, all the prosperity that you were looking for. So that's how convergent energy works, not just the reliant of, hey, okay, God said it's all going to be okay. Right. And my heart's still beating fast. How do we take care of that? And, you know, the Catholics have this great, they can't figure out which of their saints to attribute it to, but they have this great phrase, which is pray as if everything is up to God, work as if everything is up to you. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is recognize our responsibility.
Well, it also struck me, though, I mean, from what you were describing, Jody Lynn, you tell me if this is resonating with you. It struck me that what you have really come up with is a way to truly appreciate what's going on in your life as a way to get yourself into that convergent, or what we might call an aligned state. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we often talk about, being grateful, right? Having gratitude and so forth. But what you described that's the nuts and bolts of actual gratitude, of actual appreciation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, if I could add something, I think it's really needling into what is going on, because perhaps it's like from my coaching experience, it's a part of what you've learned, what you've been taught, the belief systems that you have, the automatic programming that's going on, that's saying that number in that account not safe, red alarm, let's go, holy shit, let's work, and spirit, God is saying you're fine, we got things coming to you, and not just, because what I used to do is bypass. Way back in the day when I first started learning about the law of attraction and stuff like that, I would be like, oh, I just have to be happy. So anytime I'd feel anxious or upset or whatever, like I would literally play games in my car and be like, oh, dashboard, you're so pretty. I'm so grateful that you're the color that I like. And like, I like that I can change the colors in this area here. And then I could put a picture on my screen. Never figured out how to do that, but you could. But I would go around my car because I did a lot of driving back then. So I would go around my car.
By the way. That's really a good way to start.
It was
really good.
It is a good way to start, but I started to use it as the bypass system. So instead of actually identifying with that voice or understanding where that perspective was coming from, of it feels uncertain. And in that uncertainty, my brain is saying that's not safe. It's not safe for you to be uncertain about where your next paycheck is going to come from. But heads up, like, I'm all commission. So, and that's what I chose. So I needed to have an appreciation for that side, and also get to a point where that no longer had the same trigger point or effect on my life. I wouldn't go crazy or just try and bypass that feeling. Well, I'm not feeling scared. I'm fine. Everything's good. Everything's good. Everything's good. Everything's good.
Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
Exactly. Just keep swimming. I love that, because I think there's a lot of spiritual teachers out there that teach the surface of law of attraction, or teach that surface of feeling that emotion, and they don't go to that depth, that convergence that you're talking about. And I really do think that there is magic in that alignment and understanding of yourself as a whole.
Yeah, I do too. But I do want to take just a moment, because I raised a daughter who has extreme anxiety. And so I am familiar with the medical understanding of what your physiology overtaking your situation is. I've seen it, I've witnessed it, and I've treated it for more than 10 years now. So I do want to take a moment to pause and say exactly what Walt was saying to you, Jody Lynn. Sometimes, depending on the amount of how your physiology is reacting, that type of just inventory, that type of centering, that type of reclaiming your physical state is necessary. And so if that's where you are on the scale, then don't necessarily believe that, well, if I could just pray now, or just, drive this car faster, then it would be okay. Sometimes what is required is a true response to what's happening to you physiologically. So I just want to say that and reassure that the people who are listening that, yes, there are processes that go on in our bodies. There are extremes to everything that we're talking about. Make sure you seek care for what is for you. Yeah. And then, as you were saying, Jody Lynn, that's our goal, is to then go to the next step. Once we're both in the moment and generally in our lives, once we have those situations in hand and well cared for, then we want to go into, okay, so now I'm feeling some emotional intelligence. Now I'm feeling some stability in that area. What do I do with that? Because we also experienced, a real sense of in my family, just being so glad everything was calm, that we then just kind of backed out and said, I hope it stays like this for a while, and didn't go into, okay, so now how do we grow? Now what's the next step? How do we build a foundation that's broader than just our physiology? And there are heads up about all of these areas, by the way, as I was saying, being a little too pious or being a little too addicted to a behavior, all of those sorts of things. But I just want to make sure everybody understands, we're talking about real life here. And so there are responses to all of how we feel. And
I think something to add to that too, I'm really glad that you said that, because often I have, and I see other people judging themselves based on what worked for someone else or what helped. And, my brother is a really good case of this. He, was having some issues with anxiety and some other things, depression and whatever over the last, 6 to 9 months, and really beating himself up because he's more like our mom and not like our dad. And the thing is, like, that I want people to understand is everybody is human and everybody has a different response. And there is no absolute right or absolute wrong or absolute thing that will work, even for myself and my own evolution. What worked for me a decade ago doesn't have the same effect or doesn't work. I need to be reminded of different things, like that panic attack example, really going back to the spatial awareness of like, 5 things I can see in my room, 4 things I can hear. Yeah. Whatever the 4, the 3, the 2, the 1, my occupational therapist was like, just do that, things you can taste, whatever, all of these things. And I was like, oh yes. Okay. Something I was missing in that piece, but not from a place of beating yourself up, because it doesn't matter what tool works. It's just a tool. It's in a toolbox. Like, there's no attachment to any of it. This one could work or that one. Hammer versus saw. Like, pick one. Start. Try.
Yes,
I love this, because what we're really saying is life is messy.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Right.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is life is. And I think that that's what I really, in my story, I just had to break through and remember, life is exciting and life is messy and life is fun and life is scary and life is. And in a way, I'm just so glad to be back in the realm of the living.
Yeah. I don't blame you. I mean, because what you described really is, in a sense, not being in the realm of the living.
Sure. Yeah.
And a lot of us go through that.
I think
I'm being generous. I think actually everybody goes through it, but I'm going to presume there are some people who are, up there, right there at the God level, so they don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to meeting them.
Yeah, right. Well, I've done the show for 12 years. I keep thinking somebody's going to come along.
Okay, all right.
And more than 2,000 episodes.
Sure. Yeah.
Have me on in a year. Maybe we'll look. We'll see.
But I think.
Go ahead,
the point is that life is, like, I think that going back to what you were saying at the very beginning, David, that, we can get into this frame of mind of like, I'm a spiritual being and I'm just going to be in that. And nothing's ever going to bother me, or I'm not going to pay attention to anything else. And like this frou-frou area, if you're missing it, because we were given this avatar, this body to experience. And that means everything, the contrast, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think that everything lives in every piece of that, the spectrum. And I had this download, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I don't even know how long ago it was, a while ago, that when it comes to the spectrum of feeling, it's like the spectrum of light, how every color exists inside of that one color. You can find it.
I love that technical term, by the way, the frou-frou. I love that.
Frou-frou. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. And so if you'll allow me, let me, to take this transition, because after the modules that are about each specific voice, recognizing them, understanding if you're stuck, how to nurture them, how they work in convergence, then we go into modules about convergence in real life. And I just want to piggyback on what you were talking about, Jody Lynn, because where I go to after practicing the convergent conversation, I call it, is my understanding of engaging in life is understanding that that's engaging in relationship with other people. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that we start with the definition of relationship as broad as you can be. I'm not talking about relationships. I'm talking about that every being is a conduit through which comes our lessons and the light and the energy of God. And thus we too are on this planet, as you were saying, in order to engage and be that for ourselves and others too. And so relationships are the toughest part of life. Many of us, and to some degree, we pick our 2 or 3 or 10 and then think we're done. And that's still really hard. And yet to accept the responsibility of each person that's at a stoplight with me, or that's at the grocery, who I can actually breathe the same air, or who's in my home, who I really share an intimacy with, or in my workplace, who has a work relationship. Our goal is to show up there as a being who's bringing loving energy from that voice, and emotional empathy from that voice, and an action to make a difference and answer the call to be the loving presence from that voice. And so, it gets really real after all this internal work, because then we start talking about not just how does that help me day to day, but then how does that help me actualize myself on this planet, which is in relationship with others.
I love that. One of the things that cue to my mind is I have a former co-host named Cindy Chavez, who is a relationship coach. And one of the things she loved to talk about is how it's not just our primary relationship, it's not just our friendship relationships, it's not just relationships with other human beings, it's our relationship with our computer, it's our relationship with the wall, it's our relationship with the car, with the job, with name it. We have relationships with everything. And the more of them there are, the more confused we get.
For sure. Yeah. And are we giving the same intention to all of our relationships? We think that some are more important than others, when in fact, the foundational impetus of your life is the same for each one. The form is different, of course, but are we bringing the same divine inspiration to each one, and using that filter also to understand how they might be affecting us, in order to make sure the form is the one that leads to the most holy interaction.
And then the really startling thing is when we find that all of those non live things, the solid physical things that aren't supposedly alive, amazing how much they influence us.
Oh,
it's amazing how much we have to learn from them.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And even the things that we don't really think as conscious. I always think of plants. Plants is one of those things that has taught me so much about relationship and consciousness, and that connection and that energetic bond between things, individuals. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Last night or yesterday during the day, I burnt my hand on the kettle, and I was having a hard time getting it to stop hurting. It was just red, and it's right on my hand, and I'm like, oh man, this really hurts. Put some stuff on it, whatever, right? And my husband has transplanted a bunch of aloe vera plants, and so he's taken them apart and made baby plants and bigger plants, and he's been growing them. And so we have 20 aloe vera plants, and I'm like, duh, Jody, aloe vera plant. But in my wisdom that I've acquired over, the last 5 years working with plants, I have really started to understand the interaction, that relationship, even with our own food, blessing our food, not from a place of religion or spirituality, but from connection and relationship. Thank you for supporting and serving my body in this way. And I've read studies about you cut plants and they'll scream. Even if just your broccoli, you take it out of the fridge and start cutting it up and it's screaming unless you talk to it and tell it thank you so much for being a part of my meal. So yesterday was my opportunity to really take that to the next level with Frank, my aloe plant. That's what he calls himself. So I don't know where it came from. He was just
good of you to honor that.
Frank. Yeah. I'm okay. I'm hey, Frank. Well, first I said, hey, aloe plant. And then I heard Frank. And I was Frank the aloe plant. Okay, weird. But all right, let's do it. Frank.
Whatever it takes.
Hey, I've got this burn on my hand, and I know that you can help. Can I cut a piece of you off? And then I just listened for guidance on what the cut should look like, how far, whatever. Literally wake up this morning and it's not even red anymore.
Nice.
At all. So thank you, Frank, my aloe vera plant. Everything around us is exchanging information and interacting with us, and we're in concert and relationship with it.
Absolutely. And thank you for your intentionality. Just that sense of, someone else might just go to the cabinet and rip something open and put it on there and hope for the best. But when we approach everyday things. And it can be exhausting, and maybe you're not doing it 100% of the time. And it doesn't mean you're bad if you aren't, and whatever. But you begin to learn the exponential benefits of walking in an intentional way, of really stepping into all of the energy possibilities around you with an understanding that, first of all, it's all on your side. Like, it's all designed to just allow you to be the very best you can be, and to be a humming, thrumming, version of energy, so that you can give back. And so the whole universe is conspiring for you to be awesome, and to have these wonderful moments, and to utilize this interaction in that way, because the universe needs you at your best, so you can do the very same. And as soon as we recognize that exchange and step into it intentionally, like you did, wow, the world just, and suddenly, I mean, that people ask, well, what does convergent energy feel like when I'm convergent? Well, how do I know? And it's like, it's so, like I say in my program laughingly, I'm like, you just kind of know. Like, it's just like, that's what feeling good is. Like, that's when you're in it, so yeah, I don't know what else to say about that.
Well, what you're saying reminds me of something. It reminds me of what it's like to go through rough times and then be faced with information like this. Because I remember what my reaction the first time was that I heard this kind of thing was. It was like, yeah, right, okay. I had about that much level of belief in it, and even less confidence in it.
Maybe a negative level, like, could we?
There's probably a way to do that, yeah. But seriously, when you're in that space, that's a hard place to handle this stuff.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes it is about feeling. I mean, there's a famous phrase, there's even a good book about 10% better, but sometimes it's just feeling about 1% better. Sometimes it's what we were saying before, which is in this moment when I have anxiety, in this moment when I'm faced with this decision, in this moment where I'm feeling disconnected, what do I need? Which voice do I need to invite in? So often what I find, it's that I'm neglecting something. And, I read Emmett Fox, and I speak a lot at Unity congregations, and, his golden key is anytime you have a question, invite God there. And so often I think, okay, that's all, let me just start there. Let me do the 1% of faith. Let me just step forward a little bit. And of course, what we hope to become is, in increments and then wide open, is to, just being able to recognize what's around us, beginning to be, to understand the opportunities to take those steps. And I certainly went through, and I'm still going, some days it's enough to say, all right, let's just take care of myself. Let's make sure that the basics are there. Let's make that one call or reach out to that one person, and just that 1% better. And from really coming back from the depths, those are some of the very first steps that I worked with the professional was, can you just recognize some of the simplest things, and we'll just start from there.
For myself, it would be, recognize 1%, then doubt 9/10 of it, and then decide that none of it worked, and then trust 3/10 of it. And just all over the place.
Of course.
Trying to find my way through on this thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And what the voices can help do is say, okay, well, yeah, let's give you some latitude there. Why don't you try that thing then? And then rather than, let's say I take an action and it doesn't work out the way I want. And so the actualized self of mine wants to jump down on, we'll see, I'm terrible.
This stuff doesn't work. That was my phrase. This stuff doesn't work.
This doesn't work. But if the actualized voice takes an action based on inspiration, hey, it came to me to give this a try, then likely whatever the outcome of that is, then feelings are going to say, I feel a little better that you at least tried. And feelings are going to say, hey, we learned something there, and I'm proud of you. And they're literally talking about, and inspiration's going to say, hey, thanks for trusting us. Will you trust us another time? Will you just do it? Give me another shot. When we rely on one of these voices, then that voice can just get caught. This is, remember, we talked about this. This is the self-nurturing part. And to believe that it all comes from one place, I just found isn't effective for me. I needed these different elements of my human experience to nurture each other and to inspire each other and to take action on behalf of and to, and to recognize that I'm feeling a certain way. And so to take an action and then watch the response and have that convergent conversation and realize, oh, that's how it works. Because I can feel sad and keep feeling sad. And I can be anxious the simplest one of this is and you may see this on the internet all the time, which, you can't think yourself out of a bad mood. It requires action. And, for years, I just thought I could just talk myself out of being sad or pray myself out of being sad. And now physiologically, we know from a therapy standpoint and from the true, wellness standpoint, action dictates mood. Oh, okay. That was a key component of me developing this program. It's like, okay, I thought mood just had to hang in there until it got better. Oh, no.
There's an odd piece to that, too, because what you're saying is absolutely true. Mm-hmm. But the odd piece is that as you try this stuff more and more, you actually do get to the point where you can shift it without taking an action. But the only way to get there is to take the actions first and learn it.
Right. Yeah. All of it builds on each other, and that's the point. That's what your very first. What is convergence? Convergence is that. It's recognizing it takes one thing being evaluated by something else, being inspired by something else, that these are voices that we can cultivate and learn how they work together and find that beautiful middle point where they're truly, working together. And that's the feel good energy that then inspires us. We put that into a manifestation model. And so not only are we doing better each day, but now we're taking steps towards what it is we want to build on behalf of ourselves and on behalf of other people and the world around us.
See, this is how we always know here on the show. Well, there are two ways we know whether or not the show is a good show. One way we know is that it flies. That's always, very consistent. The other way that we know it is if I ask a question and 46 minutes later, we finally finish answering it.
Which is a good thing, David. It's a good thing.
Yeah, he said good show. So I'm
great show.
But it's true. I mean, sometimes we like to call it a rabbit hole too, but really it's a hole of understanding and diving deep and really grasping what it's all about. So it may have been a very simple question, what is convergence? But quite clearly it has a lot of tentacles. It has a lot of pieces to it.
Of course. And depending where you're coming from, and I don't discount trauma and past experience and life lesson and whatever has come before, and knowing that none of us are on the same path. And so how can we create the tools, as you were saying before, that help us deal with our diverse experiences? And as you can tell, I have pretty great enthusiasm about, this is something that works. I use it every day for myself, and I'm psyched about it. I'm thrilled to be able to share it.
I love how all of us have our own different way of thinking about it. I mean, Jody Lynn and I have a common verbiage that we use to describe stuff, but we basically have all three of us three different ways of understanding the same thing. Yeah. And even if we use different words to describe it, we know what we're talking about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And people who have looked over my program from all sorts of different areas will say, oh, yeah, I learned that in 12-step. Or someone will say, oh, well, yeah, I've always thought of my three aspects as this, that, and the other. And it's like, okay, great. Yeah, of course you can bring your experience and like I say, I'm not starting a church nor for sure a cult, yes, use your experience, integrate it into my understanding. And hopefully I've created it in a way that helps. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are like, oh, I've sort of always done this. Mm-hmm. And I'm offering you a way to recognize the power of doing it intentionally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Well, I'll often be asked by somebody who doesn't really know the term law of attraction, what's that all about and so forth. And 9 times out of 10, they have a Christian background. So I'll just say, you know what sowing and reaping is? They say, yes. I say, okay, what's law of attraction? And interesting reactions I get out of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get the reaction like, yeah, right. No, that's not it. Yeah. Just reject it. No, it can't be that because sowing and reaping is a very specific thing. It can't be this other woo-woo stuff. So no, it's not that. And others say, well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, sure.
Easy.
So there's a lot of overlap here, regardless of whether we want to acknowledge it or not. It's still there.
And there always has been in faith tradition. You can go to ChatGPT and say, what list the 7 common covenants of all faith traditions over the past 3,000 years. And it will tell you exactly how, when you rise to the top of, peace, love, prosperity, and joy, it's all across. And then the gritty's in the details, and that's where we get lost. But there's always the ability for us to rise to, well, what is it we truly value about the human experience and about each other? And very typically it's, it's love and inspiration and the ability to be in community and diversity and the uncommon experience as much as the common experience. The values are really not far away. We get distracted, but we'll all take a deep breath and come back to the center on that someday.
Interesting side note about ChatGPT. If you do ask that question, it will answer the way you describe, but it will do it in about 15 to 20 paragraphs, kind of mirroring the fact that we do the same thing as humans. We go on and on and on. Describing
That's been my experience with ChatGPT too. It's very verbose. Right? Very verbose. Like it's
very
just
verbose.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so proud of itself. Like it just like
But my favorite thing is I actually told my ChatGPT, by the way, you don't always have to give me the long answer. I'm like, I like to interact with humans, and with humans, we like to give each other short answers. Okay. And I said, okay. And for the next few chats, I started doing that, and went right back to the verbose.
Like every other relationship. Darn it.
So like humans, it has a short attention span. Like, okay, I'll do it for a while. Yeah, I remember. I forgot. That just makes it all fun. We're as usual, we're like nearing the end quickly, which is really kind of discouraging, but that always happens.
It's such a great
I want to cover a few things though before we do that. First and foremost, somebody wants to find out more about convergence and the way you teach it through your course. It'd probably be a good idea if we kind of converge on how they find it.
Okay. That's great. Sure. I appreciate the opportunity. My website is davidallenbrown.com. And the only trick to that is the middle name is ALAN. But davidallenbrown.com will get you there. /convergence will get you to the next step, which is an overview, a short video, and soon to be an assessment of how well this can work for you and where maybe to start. You can find me on Instagram too, the author David Allen Brown. And if you follow me on Instagram, then I'll send you a coupon for a discount for the course itself. And
nice.
Yeah, I'm happy to offer that to anyone, as I also have a recently completed memoir, which I'm trying to get published, and publishers say, well, you need more followers. This all works together. We'll figure it out. But yeah, and there's also a contact me form on that website. So if you want to ask specific questions, or you'd like to spend a little time with me just to talk about what it is and what it might be, I'll be perfectly honest, it's a big course. It's 27 lessons. There's more than 12 hours of recorded material, plus a couple of keynotes that I've done around the country. There's more than 30 worksheets and journals that you can work through while you're doing it. It's not the quick answer. And so therefore, we also are creating a community of people. Whenever you sign up, we're going to have bi-weekly meetings. That'll be me with maybe a little more insight, but then people can bring where they are in the study, what they might be succeeding at or struggling with. We'll practice the conversation so that folks can begin to recognize and integrate those voices for them. So, it's something that I've really tried to, I didn't want to write it as a self-help book. I really did want to publish it as a course that had meaning, that had follow through, and that really takes an investment of time and energy. And so I'm very, very proud of it. Please, I'm happy to say that out loud. And I really hope people will start filling up with it.
Very good. I like that. So that's the first thing. We have 3 things that we do at the end of every one of these things.
Okay, that's good. That's number 1.
So 1 down, 2 to go. The second thing you do is that I always go to my co-host, particularly with Jody Lynn. I have 3 co-hosts, but particularly with Jody Lynn, I like doing this, where I just ask her, because she has, as the co-host, she has a perspective that I don't get, because I'm usually asking the 1 question or the 25 questions, and then she's kind of kibitzing and seeing it from the third party point of view, kind of like the listener point of view. So I'm always curious to know how she's going to tie it together, especially on a topic like this one, Jody Lynn. I know you've been thinking about this. How are you tying today's conversation together into like a summary with a bow on top?
Okay. I think that this conversation is so important and so vital with everything that's happening in our world today. There's a lot of spooky, scary things that are, pushing a lot of buttons in a lot of different areas. And that's not new. That's just life. And I think in terms of spirituality and this personal development space, a lot of people try to escape the sides of themselves, the life itself, the contrast that life provides for us. And David, I think that it's so beautiful that you're bringing people back to themselves, back to the experience, to literally converge all of the voices, bring them all together, because that's where the magic happens. And I think once we understand that and we're truly aligned, heaven and earth move to give us all the things that we've ever desired. So thank you for that reminder today, David.
You bet. So well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can see why I go to her on that.
Yeah. Good number 2.
It's really a no-brainer. I mean, seriously. It's so easy. And then the third thing that we like to do, this is something I've done for a few years now. I have a background I have a tech background. I have a marketing background. I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years, something like that. And during all that time, I've become very aware, of course, like all of us have, about how much we've transitioned here in the 21st century. Marketing is all different now. Businesses are all different now. Doing all this kind of stuff is different. Now you're in a range where, we're all basically putting stuff out there. We're doing podcasts. We're going on to social media. We're writing books. We're creating courses. We're doing all this stuff, trying to help people out. And we're just giving out information, and we don't get a whole lot of credit for it. And I said to myself, we need to do that. We need credit for that. So David, on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping in ways you don't even know about, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
That's a gift. Well, I appreciate it. And it's, I'm taking that to heart. Thank you very much.
Yeah. But it's one of those things that once I kind of started doing that by accident one day, I realized, wow, this is important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because we really don't give a lot of attention to that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That's
you just ignore
it. Yeah. It's the very right thing I need to hear right now. So thank you.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, that's the other beautiful thing about all this content we put out. There's always somebody listening who needs it.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what it is that we're saying, no matter what it is that we're sharing, there's always somebody who needs it.
Great.
Yeah.
Which is kind of astonishing, really.
Yeah, and also kind of just the way it works. We're all in the right place at the right time. If only we would believe that.
If only we would believe it. Yeah. Well, I think we are we're building belief.
I think we are.
I that's what I see society wide, not just here in the U.S., not just here in North America, across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening everywhere.
Yeah. I think people are starting to recognize that it's time to take responsibility for where they are precisely and where we are globally. And so I agree, Walt. I see that too.
And the more that happens, the more excited I get. And I always get excited even by the people who don't seem to be showing it, because they show little signs of it. You notice that? You know what I mean? Yeah.
I do know what you mean. Yep.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep. Those
Yeah.
little like, oh, you care more than you thought you did.
I mean, that just kind of fuels my fire every day. I love that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, good reminders.
So, David, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story and sharing about convergence. I like the term. I mean, like I said, we've always described it as alignment, but convergence, it actually kind of, Jolene, don't you think it kind of brings in more than just alignment?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It feels like you're bringing all of the parts in, like
Yeah.
all of the magic. Like it feels powerful. When I think of convergence, I think of power.
Yeah,
like my own power.
Yeah, that's what great. That's my intention, to understand this is a powerful thing, and that it really brings out the power within the people who are able to practice it.
Yeah.
Beautiful stuff. So thank you very much, David. Best of luck with getting the publisher for the book and
that too.
And so forth. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. And thank you, Jody Lynn, as usual, wonderful contributions. We really appreciate you. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.